Good evening to everyone tuning into this panel discussion this evening. I'm Letitia van der Walt, director at Die Waarheid Radio. Now, with the elections behind us and a new dawn waiting for South Africa, people are very confused and unsure about what is on the horizon for us as a collective, as a country. And, we hear all this talk about coalition government, but what does it really mean for me and for you? And so we've decided as the Louis Liebenberg Independent Candidate team to actually host this panel discussion and to give you our perspective on all of this, on everything happening currently and what a coalition government would mean for me and for you. I do want to make it clear that the opinions expressed here in today are the opinions of individual members, and the idea really is just to shed some light and to share our thoughts on a coalition government and whether we think South Africa is ready for this, like I mentioned. So joining me on this live today is mining magnate, businessman, philanthropist, and independent candidate in the 2024 elections, Mr. Louis Liebenberg. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Louis Liebenberg. We will also be hearing from Dirk Lotriet. He is director and chief editor at Die Waarheid Media. Dirk has worked very closely on Louis' political campaign, and this really is Dirk's playing field. So, Dirk, to you, warm welcome, and thank you so much for joining us on this panel discussion tonight.
Good evening.
We'll also be hearing from Lumey van Skalkwyk. Lumey is a seasoned radio presenter at Die Waarheid Radio, and she was also very much involved in Louis' recent political campaign, having been on the campaign bus, conducting interviews with communities from all over South Africa, really, and just finding out what, in the people's opinion, are the biggest challenges facing our country currently and why those challenges are there in these people's opinion. And then, so warm welcome to you, Lumey. Thank you for joining us this evening. And then our final guest for tonight on this panel discussion is Trishay Farmer. Trishay has a marketing role at Die Waarheid Radio, and she's also been instrumental in terms of being a role player in Louis' recent campaign in the 2024 elections. Welcome, Trishay.
Good evening.
Good. So we're going to get right into it, and we encourage you guys to make use of the chat box down below throughout this session. Drop us your comments. We're going to get back to you. Drop us your likes, your hearts, your hates, whatever. We're open to everything. We want to hear from you. And like I said, we are just going to give you our opinion and on our feel, being in this field and having spent some time with the people of South Africa and really getting to know what these challenges are that they face. And so I think we're bringing something unique to the table this evening as we discuss this, because these aren't just things and problems that we think South Africa is facing. This is things that the people of South Africa said, you know what, we've got these challenges and our country is in a state of absolute disaster. And tonight obviously is just to discuss all of this in a bit greater depth for you. So the first question today, and I'm going to raise this question to Trishay and to Louis. We'll start off with your opinion first, Trishay. Do you think that the ANC was ready for the outcome of the 2024 elections?
Letitia, I actually do think they were ready, but I don't think they expected it. They were overly confident in this year's elections. I mean, Ramaphosa even said in one of the interviews that anyone that thinks they will not win the elections are just silly. The confidence is the biggest party in South Africa that actually does a lot of the groundwork. So the citizens of Africa, they know them, they see the faces, they know who to vote for, basically. And the opposition parties, they are just pathetic. Like, there's no party at the moment in South Africa that actually really opposes the ANC, the ruling party at the moment. Like, all the policies are so different. So it's basically a thing of picking your devil, like choosing the devil you know or the devil you know. I do think they were ready. I just don't think they expected it.
They expected it, yeah, absolutely. I think it was quite a turn of events for them. Now, also on the same question, I think we want to hear from Louis. Obviously, as an independent candidate in the 2024 elections, we know what you went into this campaign and why you did what you did. And yeah, I think I want to hear from you. Do you believe the ANC was ready for the outcome of the 2024 elections, Louis?
Hi, Letitia. Yeah, it's one thing to be ready for something psychologically, but I mean, physically on the ground, I think they didn't communicate the proper communication, and also the risk of losing so many seats in Parliament. I think like 71. Am I right? Now, that has a tremendous impact on people. Physically, it is a minister or a member of parliament tomorrow morning waking up with the reality that in a few months' time or whenever their session is then complete, they won't be able to pay their rent. It is as easy as that. These people, we get an idea in our minds because we grow up thinking that ministers are something highfalutin and untouchable. But it's only human beings like us, and they've just got a specific kind of work. I just want to get that across, because I remember how I thought growing up about a minister. It's way up there with God.
Yeah.
And suddenly, obviously, being in touch with some of the ministers and looking at the realities of their life, I realized that it's very hard for them to pay their water and lights. And I think a lot of these murders that you would see in KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga specifically, also in Gauteng here and there, is because of that reality. They are actually killing somebody that's going to fill their space, and they don't want that. So it's almost like the taxi war. So, no, the ANC did not expect it on ground level. If you look back at the last NASREC conference, was that now 2022? I'm confused now for a moment. I think 2022. In the lead up to that, there was a lot of tension and also a lot of jostling for position. I found it, for example, in Northwest, where if I remember correctly, there was that issue with after Supra with a new premier, and Supra wanted to get back into the chair. What you would find with ministers, it is such a cutthroat thing that there's not a lot of love lost between colleagues even, because even in there's only 400 seats, and yes, okay, the ANC has got, I think, 2/3 of that at the moment, maybe a bit less now. My calculations is leaving me I'm getting lost there. You can help me a bit later with the exact figures. I haven't looked at it this morning, but the reality is they represent people, but very often you find that they're representing themselves.
Absolutely.
And I think we saw it even with the NP. Once the ANC came into power in 94, there was also the same kind of tendency. If you remember Kortbroek, as he was called, he was the leader of the National Party. At the end, he compensated and he tried to get a position, even with the Milders in the Freedom Front. I'm aware of a lot of trauma playing out currently in the Freedom Front, and especially the right wing of the Freedom Front. I've heard that they actually fired a very prominent member of the Freedom Front because of the outcome of the elections. Okay, it's not addressing the ANC's position, but what I'm trying to say, it's affecting everybody.
Yeah.
Because the Freedom Front shrunk, I think, from almost 400,000 to 200,000. It's like almost 50% drop. And that's obviously a move towards the DA, but then you can't pick it up in the DA either because they're still on 21 something percent. So the question must be raised, have our voters lost confidence in the system? Because 58% turnout at the election is not good.
Yeah. Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. Now, looking at key provinces such as KZN, where obviously the MK has now surfaced as a favoured party, how do you believe this makes the ANC feel? Over to you, Dirk.
Well, obviously they're very unhappy about that. KZN is economically one of the strongholds in South Africa. It is a big loss to lose all those economic power. Of course, a lot goes to the national government, but they did lose. It's an important province. They did lose a lot. Absolutely. A lot of the residents live there. Yeah, I think it's a terrible loss to them. They didn't expect it. Of course, they should have expected it. Politics is a science. You have political scientists, you can press on their numbers, you can get the details and analyze it from there. It's as simple as that. It is a science, you do have exact numbers, and I don't think the ANC really believe those.
Yeah, it's like Trisha said in the beginning also, I think the head gets so big because for so many years you've now run this company, you know, and company, I'm meaning to say country, but really they're running a company. That's what they do, you know. For them, it's all about business and just personal gain and what they can get out of it personally. So, yeah, absolutely. Louis, what is your opinion on this, on the MK that's now kind of taken over KZN?
Okay, and you would have seen on the campaign, I had to explain all the time why I stood as an independent candidate. Yeah. I think some of you that know me intimately, I was not sure at all whether I would like to partake, and I left it very late. And the reason is I wanted to hear from God what He wants for my life, specifically now. You know, politics is not just going to sit in Parliament. It absorbs your whole life. And so I took a bit of a pragmatic stance in the sense that I looked at my life and I looked at what I can contribute in the remaining 10 or 15 years of my life or whatever. But it becomes a bit more personal when you want God's way for your life. Now, politics is only a business, as you say, but what you all know is that my support was there for President Zuma in person.
Yeah.
Now, that becomes complicated because especially as we got involved with the IEC and the court cases, and a lot of their anger, or may I say it, I'm struggling to find the right concept because I will tend to be too harsh. But there was definitely an attempt to eliminate me and President Zuma. Now, obviously, me in a lesser sense, they went full out for him. But that kind of, I suppose, it is part of politics, and like in industry, there's difficult to entry. But what I didn't realize as a novice is that the electoral court I did not view as neutral. And maybe people can differ from me in this regard. And I don't want to attack the democracy or the fact that they can be objective, but I've seen in our situation, President Zuma's situation and my own, that it was really only us that they aimed at. There was a few other parties and so on, but I think there was a bit of a fear about this truce, this working together. And now you must understand also that initially we wanted to form the Toekomsfront that was going to be the political party. And I think Dirk must must maybe help me here, but there was no intention early on in the campaign or in that there was an indication that there would be new legislation coming in regarding signatures for new parties and so on. So I think a lot of curveballs came at a very late stage. And in a democracy with a constitution as ours and rule of law, I find it difficult that even the electoral system can be manipulated to the extent it was. We also know about the allegations by the MK that there was judges in the electoral court that was against him before. And one would normally find that specifically a judge of that profile would recuse themselves from the bench, which did not happen. And eventually they used that specific woman, I forgot her name now for a moment, to come out with a judgment. I felt that was highly insensitive, and I think the IEC, although portrayed that it was free and fair, there was definitely initially the idea that certain people had to engage in court cases. As a matter of fact, I am still engaged in a court case with the ANC as it stands. But the IEC, but the horse has bolted. So the time limits, the time frames to answer to the IEC, to get lawyers involved, I can just imagine what President Zuma went through, and we discussed it a number of times. But coming back to the MK as such, the government of South Africa and the ANC should have taken into account that a lot of things have gone wrong internally in their party. And what has happened to President Zuma being subjected to judicial procedures for 22, 23 years in a constitution like ours is unheard of. This is like the Nuremberg trials. And how can somebody, especially I've got a bit of legal knowledge, I mean, justice delayed is justice denied. So we ended up with a party that's very angry. They wanted to take Nkandla from him. I got involved there. He couldn't afford his legal fees anymore. That was at a level of 28 million already. He entered into this situation as a man that was angry. But yet, I went and I saw him very recently before the elections, and I had a private meeting with him. And what amazed me at that stage, he was not operating from a position of anger. He was the chess player that people see him as. So the MK had a strategy, but there was a simple problem. Because President Zuma didn't know whether he would be able to stand as a candidate, as we know in that specific section 400 or whatever, that they didn't want him to. And it was strange, obviously, and I want Dirk's opinion here. I mean, if the IEC knew, I think it was 417, if I'm not mistaken, that they counted on, why did they leave it so late to actually adjudicate in May? A man is campaigning. Now, I say, and I really feel the MK could have done even far better if they had a surety, because I know how I felt that, okay, is Mpumalanga in, is it Limpopo in? You don't really want to spend resources. I see that Media 24 asked me a question, and they said they believe I've spent 8 million rand on my own campaign, which was only an idea if it was Toekoms Front and we could have fought on all fronts. And they said I funded all the MK expenses.
Oh my goodness, imagine that, Louis. I would give myself a pat on the back for that. I mean, amazing.
Believe me, I would not have the trouble I'm having at the moment if that was the case. So a lot of speculation, but I suppose that's part of politics. I'm talking too much now, but no, the MK should have done even a bit better.
I hear you. Dirk, do you want to elaborate on what Louis had just said there in terms of the IEC, and yeah, just the way everything was conducted and a lot of the legalities, if I can call it that, changed and legislation changed at kind of last minute.
Yeah, it was very, very last minute, and especially with a personality as important as the former president suddenly being removed. That must be a big blow for a party such as MK, especially
Yeah.
a new one. But I still think they did very well. I've spoken to the Mpumalanga campaign manager. I've spoken to the media spokesperson. They all told me we are more determined because of this
Mhm.
delay, and which they saw as a unfair treatment. They were very determined because of that, and I do think that did reflect in the end.
Absolutely.
Luckily for them, they had someone with a lot of credibility to stand as the presidential candidate, former Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng. I think it's probably the most credible politician in the country at the moment. So they did very well there. And I think the results are something to be so proud of. Traditionally, new parties battle in this country. They overcame that hurdle as easily as could be.
Incredible, absolutely incredible. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what is a coalition government really, because people are, and I see this trending all over social media, because people don't really understand. I mean, we've never in 30 years of democracy had a coalition government. What does it mean? What does it mean for me and you, the citizens of this country? And yeah, so Louis, if you can elaborate a little bit on this, what exactly, in your opinion, is a coalition government?
Dis 'n mors.
Those were my words. I said it's a disaster to start off with, in my opinion.
Look, this is Africa. And I just think, although we've got the Westminster system in most of our parliamentary, it's not quite. I mean, we don't have a lower house. I see that President Zuma wants to go that way, and a higher house and a House of Lords and all these things. But to a large extent, we've adopted a lot of the West. And for some other reason, people think that we're going to just like work happily ever after. I see even ladies putting on dresses with the ANC and the MK motive and trying to get into the spirit of things. But let's talk about then the manifestos. Okay, if we can go by manifestos and value-driven issues. Now, we've all seen the cross puzzle with regarding abortion, regarding LGBTQ, whatever, how they view the roles of the different sexes in society. I mean, those are the issues. Those are the issues in churches where they fight about should the gays be able to lead a ministry. We've got issues regarding extreme poverty and unemployment, abortion, there's women's rights, all these things that we hear every day in the newspapers. Now, the interesting thing to me is, although you can agree on a lot of that, once it comes to reality of economy, what can we pay for? The whole question of hospitals and the insurance. I mean, I haven't seen President Zuma sign so many pieces of legislation since just the last 2 weeks before the election. Now, one must remember that signing legislation into power, into existence, is a long, lengthy process. It seems almost like fabricating a jab, one shoe fits all for the country so that everybody's happy. I still ask the question why the lights are still on, because why did we then suffer for years, and just because of the election we didn't? And been burning. Now, once it comes to the issues on the ground, and especially once you get down to the provinces and regions, and now you have to fix up potholes in your street. And that is the responsibility of the municipality, and they don't have a budget for it. So here's where the fights come, because you can clearly see in Cape Town the DA has got money because the rich are there, and people are emigrating there or semigrating. And even the Freedom Front used that as a reason why they've lost vote, is the semigration to the Cape. All right, so they've got the reach there. But now you've got Gugulethu that says we don't have toilets at our houses and we don't have water. So what eventually happens if we think about coalition, think about all the different standards and viewpoints. Where do I come from when I get up in the morning? Now, we've already seen in eKurhuleni and in Port Elizabeth, or what's it, Kogelberge, or you must help me, Lumay. I still struggle. You can say it 100 times. My mouth doesn't want to pronounce it. Okay, but yeah. And you know, the realities is of such, because we are facing such economic challenges, and it's not a joke. We are basically bankrupt. The fiscus is empty. We are relying on 2.5 million taxpayers. We are relying on, there's 12.5 million registered, but 2.5 million really paying tax in a population of 62 million. Then and we are relying on 70 companies that pay 70% of the taxes in this country. That tells you why we have corruption, because that 70 companies have extreme power over politicians. So politicians can plan, and they can, in a coalition, say, yes, I give and take, and it works up to a point, until the reality strikes that the budget doesn't work out. That happens. There's a fight, and then desperation seen. And my philosophy about this, or rather call it ideology, is that once people in local government see that the money is running out, they grab, they hold on to it. They either don't spend it on the budget, and therefore there's a surplus by the end of the year, and they suddenly have to splash it on cars or ambulances, whatever, or just go and deliver toilets and put it somewhere there for 2 kilometers on end where nobody needs it, or do something ridiculous like bamboozling the money through their own accounts or through pure corruption. This is where I see a problem. You know, Dirk, you would know a bit better, but a centralized government, which to an extent we already have. They talk about decentralization. But I've heard and I've seen many a time how municipal money and provincial money is suddenly grabbed by the central government because of shortages. Do you really think if the ANC cannot pay salaries that they will now fix your streets? So in coalition, I think this is the challenges that we're going to face. And especially now with the ANC that lost so much, they would like to still hang on power. And I think they're still going to treat this as a one-party state.
Like I say, in democracy in 30 years, we've never had this. So no one really knows how this playing field works. And I think that is the biggest concern for South African citizens currently is, it doesn't really matter who goes into a coalition with who. We don't know how to handle this. How would a coalition state, what would it look like? Dirk, over to you. Do you believe South Africa is ready for a coalition government?
I don't think what's ready and what we're not ready for is very relevant at the moment. In the old days, the shipping captains, they believed the earth was flat and they knew the world up to there and up to there. And on those maps, they drew little signs that said DBH, which stands for Dragons Be Here. We're entering an unknown now, and dragons be there. So we must be careful for that. Having said that, I don't believe a coalition is the right thing for us. I don't think it's the right solution. I'm very much in favor of government of national unity as our solution. I think coalition will only be infighting in the relevant parties. I think it will be party members who try to outgun each other. It won't work. A government of national unity is the only thing that can work as far as I'm concerned.
In my opinion too, I agree with you. Now, what in your opinion are the main factors that led South Africa to this place? I'm going to raise this question to Lumay and thereafter Louis. What would you say, Lumay?
I think that we wouldn't be in a coalition if the people still believed in the main party. I think that the citizens of South Africa, as we did this campaigning, are waking up and they're realizing that we were being lied to year after year after year, and nothing is changing. And I think for the first time in 30 years, we are sitting somewhere where I don't think any of us is prepared for. I mean, we are having this discussion on this, and I think the main thing leading up to this is empty promises. The promises that is over-delivered on, or well, they are saying that they're going to deliver on, but there's no possible way that they can deliver what they say, because they're going too big. The need is simply too big in order to cater for everything. And I do feel like they care more for their position of power than the position of the people.
Sure.
And there are people being put in positions that doesn't have what it takes to be in that position. And that is why we are seeing the spending that we are seeing. They don't know how to work with money. If you don't have a job and now you are earning 100,000 of rands, you're not going to know how to spend that. And that is why the planning is absolutely going down the drain. So I think that leads to corruption. The whole situation I think we're facing here is based on empty promises. And this election, if it showed anything, is that, the ANC lost 17%, and they lost 17% because they are simply not delivering the people's need.
Absolutely. I love that point that you've raised there. It's absolutely so true. You know, over-promising, under-delivering, and it's been going on for years on end. And now we're sitting here and still even in this, you know, I think all the coalition discussions going on now is still the ANC going and saying, well, what can we grab? What can we hold on to? No, not what is in the benefit of the people of South Africa. And that is the problem that we have here. Now, Louis, what do you believe was the build up to this point?
Sorry, I missed you there for the moment.
Sorry. So what do you believe, Louis, was the build up to this point, you know, to getting where we are, and the main factors that led us to this place where we are now facing a coalition government?
Since 1994, we must realize that a lot of voters have come on board. Those voters are not ignorant. We've got internet. We've got all the facilities that people didn't have prior to 1994. There's a whole new stratosphere of young people between the ages of 18 and 35 that is disgruntled. Yet they are educated, maybe not at the level that we wish, because we know education is an issue. But I mean, there are far more educated people, young people today, if I just think what they are exposed to from a very young age compared to our generation. So you're not dealing with ignorant, stupid people. And those people are looking at this country and they see that there's no opportunities. There's like a 68% unemployment at that age. And that is the bomb. That is the atomic bomb that can still explode. I think we have seen just the beginning of that. Firstly, in the previous election, we saw that the youngsters stayed away.
Yeah.
All right. This time around, it seems to me that the older people stayed away. Okay, I haven't got the stats. I'm just looking purely at what we saw in the rows. The youngsters were out there with their what do you call vibes and whatever, and they were quite excited about going to the polls.
No.
I think the older generation, so the youngsters are there and they are going to make a big difference. If you look at the metropolitan vote, you will see, and yes, the DA brags about it, but it does tell us something about the thinking of people that's been traditionally ANC voters. The metropolitan is totally dominated now by the DA. Okay, and I'm not a DA fan. I'm just stating fact. Okay, so if you look at the rural areas, that is different. So I think the MK, in time to come, my suggestion to them would be to be more prominent, active in the metropolitan areas, not only in Durban. If they want to be a player nationally, they will have to extend their footprint to more than just Mpumalanga and Natal. I saw somebody writing last night, and it was somebody prominent, but I can't remember now who it was, that KwaZulu-Natal must now separate from South Africa. Now, obviously, that is part of the talks that is happening behind closed doors, even between the King and the MK. So that is something that we must watch in future. But remember, that's not something that happens overnight. I know the Cape Exit Group are fighting already, Hein Marks and the guys already for 20-odd years. It's not just something to inform a country you're going to leave them. I'm just saying that because it is, though, we must realize we've got a situation of KwaZulu-Natal and South Africa at the moment, Cape Town and South Africa. And we cannot ignore, no politician can ignore disgruntled people anymore. And what I see, for example, here in Namaqualand as well, is that the employment is, well, it's Namaqualand and the Northern Cape and the Eastern Cape are the worst off in South Africa economically per capita income. Per capita income is really low. I can't put a figure to it, but it's not more than about 4,000 rand. And that's terrible. So you can't run an economy on that. But what I'm trying to say is that what the government doesn't realize is that in the election, there was still a lot of sentiment, but that is playing out and they're losing oxygen. And so what I suspect happening in the next election is that the ANC will halve its support because the Madiba magic is gone. Yeah. And then they had the Ramaphoria. Ramaphoria has now disappointed them. And what are they now looking for? They're now looking for a hero. Yeah. Now, it's dangerous to look for a hero in the sense that hero must have a plan.
Exactly.
But what? So if the MK now this time disappoints the youth, you will see more and more and more violence and more university uprisings. And we are older, almost like Italy getting an older generation here. The youngsters are, what is the percentage? But it's like 60-odd% of the population already, youngsters under the age of 35. So those things, education, financing, baby care, natal care, those things are going to start playing a major role. And I think we're going to see more and more pressure from women, because women are educated and they're very disciplined. The young men are still buggering around. I think the pressure is going to come from women and say, you are not looking after us. And then I think the rural vote will turn against the ANC.
Yeah.
So back to the thing, and I don't think necessarily they're gonna go for a government of national unity. I'm in contact with some of the players, In fact, I had a discussion last night with Carl about the issue, and what they are trying to do is convince President Zuma to go in a coalition ANC, EFF, MK. Okay. So that's being talked in the papers, but the one saying no at the moment is MK.
Yeah. I can imagine. And I can't see them personally. I cannot see the MK going into a coalition with the ANC. I personally, I can't see that. I can't see that happening for us. Now, on our recent campaign, traveling through various cities and speaking to the public, asking them what they believe the biggest political and economic challenges are, 95%, if not more, of people said joblessness. This is something, Lumay, you would know. When we were conducting these interviews with people, everyone said there isn't jobs for the people. And this obviously creates all kinds of different stuff and other challenges for South Africa, such as our crime rates continuously increasing, like we've seen throughout the past 30 years. I mean, it's insane to look at a country that's now supposed to be in this amazing space after 30 years of democracy, sitting where we are, looking at crime statistics just on the constant rise, just looking at the challenges that we face. It doesn't make sense that in 30 years we've gone so much backwards when in actual fact we should have actually moved up, So, I mean, South Africa has an unemployment rate of over 32%. Now, you gave the stat now, amongst the youngsters, Louis, that's about 65%. So obviously in these different age groups, it matters, and it's dependent on the age group, and education and things that you've mentioned. But overall, an unemployment rate of 32% for a country, I mean, this puts us in one of the highest brackets worldwide. This is insane, So I want to know, do you believe a coalition government will be able to create more jobs? And I'm going to hand this question over to Trishay first.
Okay. In my opinion, it honestly depends on which way the coalition is going to go. So we have top four parties. We have the ANC in the middle, the ruling party. Then we have the DA all the way on the right side, the leading opposition party. And then the other two leading parties, the MK and the EFF. Now, the MK and the EFF are completely on the left side of things, and the DA is completely on the right side of things. MK has already stated that under the presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa, they will not form a coalition with ANC. And with that said, we've seen the numbers of the unemployment just rise up under the presidency of President Cyril Ramaphosa. It's just been going downhill from there. Looking at the policies of all of these parties, I'm putting the ANC in the middle, and I'm putting the DA on the right side, and the EFF and the MK on the left side. The DA's policies are very anti-poor, free market, privatization, such as health, education, transport, and power. They're very anti-LGBT, all of that stuff. Whereas the MK and the EFF will push the government into more of a socialist side of things, because the MK and the EFF, on their stances, they are very pro-poor, nationalization. Looking at the top four policies that they have: expropriation without compensation, as nationalization, state capacity, basic services. We see the DA completely on the left side of things. They even said that the minimum wage will be cut when they come into power.
Yeah.
So with the coalition between the DA and the ANC, I do not see unemployment rates going up. I do not see more jobs. I don't see the mineral wealth being put back in the hands of the ordinary people. Whereas if the ANC does go into coalition with more of the left-wing parties, when the EFF and the MK's policies can come into play more, then we will definitely see some employment.
Absolutely agreed. And Lumay, what are your thoughts on this topic?
I think it's very easy to promise jobs, and when you get into parliament, and it's a whole different story when you get there, because the government is still the government, and our financial situation is still our financial situation. What to be put in there?
Yeah.
And I think not only do we have a limitation of jobs, we have a limitation of resources. And once we get there, somebody needs to train them. You can't put somebody in a position if they're not equipped to be in that position. So I think it's very easy to say, we're going to create more jobs, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, because people will say anything to get there. But once they're here and they realize, okay, wait, this is a whole different ball game, I didn't expect this, it's difficult to come down the ladder again and say to the people, oh, it's not as easy as we thought. Because we've been doing it, if I'm thinking Louis Liebenberg Independent, where we are giving jobs on mines. And it's really difficult to train those people to make sure that they are equipped and safe and all of those. I don't think this is going to happen, because they've been promising jobs for 30 years. Is it going to fall out the sky? You can't just create jobs. You need businesses in order to get that right.
And that's the thing. I think it's all about skills development. Where does a job come from? It's exactly what you said now. You need to skill people. People need to be skilled. And I know this is a very important thing, Louis, and I'm going to hand over to you to also give us your opinion on this. But I know skill development is a very critical role that you also play, in your own business, in the mining sector. And because otherwise you're just giving people a fish once again. You're not teaching them how to fish. So what is your opinion on this? And especially, I think, touching on things like the skills development.
Yeah, well, let's just go one step back and say, I do not believe that government can create employment. Look, if you look at when the National Party came into government in 1948, 95% of the government employees was English. That was for example, on the railways. What government tends to do is they try and give many people jobs, but then they don't really realize in what state the economy is. Okay, so if we go back in history and we look at the arm blanke vraagstuk, we've been in this position before, with the difference that our unemployment rate wasn't nearly as high as it now. The inflation wasn't as high, and we obviously, yes, after depression, but after the Second World War, things were going better, and the baby boomers actually had it quite fine. The interest rates lowered, and the banks tend to give people more money. Now, that's a very important thing, because when you want to start a business, let's be practical, you go to the bank and you ask them for a loan. The first thing they ask you for either your employment references and your salary bank statements for the past 6 months, or they say to you, okay, give us your idea. And very often you find that the bank doesn't understand your business, especially informal type of business, as the startup kind of business. Now, then you need entrepreneurs like myself to finance those operations, or family or members that believe in you. Now, so the entry level for our young people are very high, and they then tend to just leave their passion and go into a job that can become a career, hopefully, and they end up on the wrong path. That is back to what I said about God's perfect will for your life. So people end up on the second or third or fourth choice, but they knew in their heart of hearts that that was not their talent. Okay, so people end up in the wrong jobs, and then they're unhappy, and then your productivity drops, and then your economy doesn't do well. Countries understanding and leaders understanding that people need to be happy at what they do, and that it must be a dream more than a career only, and they tend to do well. Now, practically applying it, we still have in South Africa red tape that was brought over by the Westminster system by the West. The West to Africa can be good, but it's also poison. Okay, if we think back about Helen Zille talking about Singapore, that is so great, they've established this, waterline, this, that, but we've also brought in a very regimentary type of thinking about government. So what we find, for example, if I make it practical now in Namaqualand, I start with a project to work, what we call a CAM project, a Community Artisanal Miners project on the mine. What you find, people that's in government will come and put meters at your gate to see exactly how much the pollution is. They try and stop your vehicles as much as possible. So who's involved here? The traffic, the police, the government issuing licenses and permits, and even getting more involved, like involving newspapers or radio to try and put you down. Bring in environmental issues whilst it wasn't there before. So you've got that kind of thing. And I mean, in our example, we started with 300 people, employing them. I just want to try and make it practical. And then suddenly you find that there's opposition, and you're in court every second day, like we are at the moment. And so, in other words, our system is not geared for ordinary people. It is geared for a very wealthy entrepreneur, and then everybody works on a salary for that person. That is how our system works. Think about business. The CEO gets 10 million rand a month, and the worker at the bottom gets 8. He cannot afford a house. Yet the worker at the bottom puts in more energy. If we take the kilojoules from the bottom worker, he works 10 times harder than the CEO with his 10 million. We've got the wrong system. We need it from the bottom up. And that's what I've been trying, for example, in the Northern Cape. Now, if I can tell you how difficult it is to get permits, how to get the unemployed employed, because they have to go through medicals. And then a lot of them has got small transgressions. Because if you are unemployed, what do? You go and grab food. Now you've been caught, and now suddenly you're being in jail for 3 months. When we have unemployment at the rate of, they say, 36% now, went up from 32 to, I heard you mention 32. It apparently went up by 4%. You are talking about a dangerous situation. And if you double that when you're talking about youth, you can understand that people lose motivation, and therefore you've got a lot of suicide and depression under young people. So what do we need to do? The stuff that we're doing in the Northern Cape. But we need the government to understand that we cannot try and fight a system with a centralized government system without people realizing even what you do in that specific region. Let me tell you, Mantashe, the guy there up there with DMR, does not even realize that we have got a project for young people that's unemployed at our mine. They do not come here. They don't know it. And if you try and bring it to their attention, it's like it's not important. Why? Because of the gravy train at the moment. Whether we know it or not, the permit system, the tender system goes to the wrong people. You've got people in the Northern Cape that cannot get fish quotas to work the fish, the crayfish and so on, and also the diamonds and gold and copper, because somebody's sitting in Cape Town, that's a connection of the minister, that gets it. Now, even for me that has got influence, I'm not saying I've got all the influence, I've got a measure of influence. Can you imagine how a young person feels that doesn't get unemployment because the big companies are failing and they're going overseas? We've got Murray and Roberts, for example, that do not construction work in South Africa anymore. We do not see construction. I don't know when last I went past a site where there was cranes and a lot of workers shouting and the dagga being thrown around. I can't remember that. Now, that's a sign of a country dying, and that is the issue. Politicians cannot create employment. It is business that does that. And if business are bound with red tape and courts and fighting and all these kinds of things, and may I add, the role of the union, if that is not managed correctly, then people cannot get jobs, because then the employer gets scared and he doesn't employ people anymore. That's the kind of thing that we are facing.
Wow, that's powerful stuff that you've just said there, Louis. I hope everyone on the live is listening to this, because this is absolutely so true. Another very important factor to keep in mind is global investment, obviously. How, in your opinion, will a coalition government impact investment from partners and overseas investors? Over to you, Dirk.
Well, investment is very important. Jobs in its own is not the answer. We have to create jobs, but at the same time, we must make sure that those are taxable jobs. We must create a robust, stable economy, and we must get growth. And the only way to get growth is through investment. Some coalitions will facilitate investments, some won't. Some will push the investors off. Some coalition partnerships will kill the rand. We've seen last week there was blood on the floors of JSE already. The rand was in chaos. There was an overcompensation this week again. The only answer is to wait and to see what happens. And that is one of the reasons I do believe in a government of national unity. Louis said he doesn't believe that will happen. But any other option, if we go to the DA and ANC together, there will be big unhappiness on the other side. If we go to the EFF and MK or MK as coalition partners, it might harm the rand, it might harm our economy, either on the short term or even on the longer term. That's something that remains to be seen. Yes, coalitions in itself will have an effect on job creation, it will have an effect on the economy. It just depends on which partners decide to work together.
Louis, and your opinion on this, if we look at global investment, do you believe that a coalition government would be able to handle this, and how will it impact South Africa, looking at a coalition government and global investment?
Excuse. Sorry, Letitia. You know that I've disappeared and I couldn't find myself on the screen anymore.
No, I saw video posts, so but I'm gonna rephrase that question. I'm just gonna mention it again. But we're talking about coalition government and obviously global investment, and how would a coalition government, how would this impact the situation? Because if people in South Africa, if the citizens of South Africa feel so unsure currently, what message are we giving to investors globally?
I think it's partly the fact that coalition government is a new thing to us, but remember, to the West, it's not new. So we must remember that 80% of real imports and business and GDP income comes from the West. It's still a reality, although BRICS is coming up and so on. It's going to take 20, 30 years for us to forge relationships to a level where we can not look at the West. We cannot ignore the West. We've seen it on the Palestinian issue. You cannot ignore the West. Not in a country like this. We're going to have to strike a balance. So from that angle, a coalition and talking about these different issues is important. But there's another issue, and that is the reality that banks must feel safe to do business in your country as well.
Exactly.
So once a thing like expropriation, like without compensation, comes into play, and we know it's coming into play, how the market is going to take that is almost predictable. The West is going to say, we're not safe anymore. We're not going to bring the money to the country anymore. We're not going to invest. We're not going to build factories and so on. We're not going to employ people in South Africa because we don't know what's going to happen next. The second thing is the banks are going to say to themselves, can we finance a house? Can we finance a business? And that becomes terribly important. So the ideal situation would be that it would be a combination of a socialistic approach. In other words, we have to look after our people, but still realize that money buys the whiskey.
Yeah.
And that is a reality that I don't think in our whole thinking in politics has really come to the fore. Hopefully, with newcomers, even like Gayton McKenzie, with his background and so on, but he's a bit of a deal maker. Those kind of people can say, listen, we have to be realistic in terms of how fast we can move, how quickly we can have land distribution. The government still has 70% of all the ground in the land. They can distribute some of that. So hopefully in this process of the ANC that took a knock, we will have people and entrepreneurs coming on board and saying, listen, you can't do certain things. We have to implement a combination of nationalization of some of the banks, maybe get a state bank, maybe nationalize the Reserve Bank. But you must still have a free economy. And who's going to finance all those things? We know that once the West does not make money in a project, they withdraw their money, they withdraw their companies. They've just done it with Shell. And if we want to be totally stupid, we must just go for the populistic voice and give land and all that and forget about the fact that our people must eat.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now,
I will have to run. I will have to run, and I'm feeling so sorry that I have to do this to you,
100%.
But I don't have a choice.
No problem at all. We're going to wrap it up with a final point. Thank you so much for your time, Louis. Much appreciated.
I'm so sorry to do it so abruptly. I never planned this, but I have to run and look after something. I'm so sorry about it. It was great talking to all of you. But now at least Lumay and Trishay would get some words in now.
Thank you so much for joining us. All the best.
Have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Bye.
So, guys, the final point that we want to discuss is the fact that the ANC and the DA are already in discussion, regarding a coalition. We've said this, and we see it all over social media, that they are obviously I don't want to say talking about it, they're negotiating about how and what, that's kind of where we're at now. But what are your general thoughts on this, and what outcome do you believe we can expect if a coalition were to happen between these two parties specifically? Over to you, Lumay.
I think there is a ton of pressure on the DA, but also on the ANC. The whole country is watching. And we saw the posters, Vote to Save South Africa. They have an immense amount of pressure on top of them right now to perform. And I think it's going to be complicated even further by a number of things, because we're going to have to see 3 coalitions more in Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, and the Northern Cape. And with the ANC falling 17%, there's going to be a lot of rope pulling. Mm-hmm. The ANC is going to want to show muscle. They're not going to want to give up power. And the DA is going to want to show muscle, and they're going to want power. So we're going to see this the whole time. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of unequal commitment as well, because they are so different. And on top of the unequal commitment, turf protection, I think it's going to be a big thing. They want to protect their turf, and a big amount of lack of trust. And I don't want to sound negative, but they're rival parties. And if we have anything to look at, we can look at where in the past they've worked together and why it's
successfully.
I don't know how I feel about this, but most people say it's going to improve the economy. But I think where the real thing is going to come in is with the budget. The first key milestone of this new government is going to be with the budget. by the end of July, because a DA-backed government would likely push for tightening in the budget to show that muscle, and any efforts to streamline spending may be well received by the markets, but interfering with key line items such as wages and grants, which is a very big thing in South Africa, I think will get negative reaction from the traditional ANC voter, and they become suspicious then of supporting a DA-backed government. So if we want different results, we need to move different. And it's something we said a lot in the campaign. But I do think, and I'm seeing and I'm watching on social media, that a lot of people said that they would vote different. They would have voted different if they knew that the DA was going to form an alliance with the ANC.
Wow.
And I want to play devil's advocate a little bit. If you look at the other side of things, I think what they're doing now is to rather be in the camp and just see what they are planning and feel like they have a little bit more control than what they would have had, rather be part of conversations than looking in from the outside. So I don't know if that's what they're trying to, like, keep your friends close but your enemies closer, if that's what they're trying to do. But I do think that we're going to see a lot of rope pulling, a lot of power again. I want to show my power. I want to do this. There's pressure. There's pressure in the government at the moment. There's pressure in Parliament, and I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this whole DA-ANC thing. I don't think it's going to work. I really don't.
That's my sentiment as well. Absolutely. Now, Dirk, what do you think about this ANC-DA coalition? Do you believe it is something that can work?
I think it can work better if the DA brings its alliance partners with them. It will give them a bit of equality in its negotiations with the ANC. But the markets will like it. The markets will love it. But the other parties on the left of the ANC will definitely not like it. I don't think it's going as far as predicting violence, no. But yes, I don't think it's a perfect solution. It's probably from a financial point of view, it's a good solution, but not perfect at all. The test, as Lemay said, it's definitely the first budget in July.
Yeah.
That will tell us a lot from such a coalition. I don't think a coalition between MK and the ANC is possible at all, but I do think the EFF and Gayton McKenzie's PA is possible. That will give them, let's say, around 51%, which is enough. But then again, neither of them are known as good coalition partners. The EFF has always been in municipal coalitions. They've been a difficult partner with unreasonable demands, and I think they will continue that into national level. They've already spoken about Floyd as Minister of Finance and demands like that, which I don't think is in the country's interest.
It's interesting.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to keep our eye on it and see. But I'm not a big fan of the DA, but I think it might be the safest coalition at the moment. Not necessarily the only good one, but I think it's the safest one from a financial point of view. But as I said earlier, a government of national unity is, as far as I'm concerned, the only practical solution for this whole matter.
Solution for us. Now, seeing this is the last question, I'm going to hand over to Trichet to also comment on this as the last point of discussion. Trichet, what do you believe? Do you think it's workable, the coalition between the ANC and the DA?
Letitia, as a person of color, it is quite sad seeing the downfall of the ANC. I mean, the legacy was built on the blood, sweat, and tears for our freedom. And now it seems that it's just wasted by greed and corruption. But with that said, voting in a white majority party like the DA, especially in a country like South Africa with our history, it just feeds into the narrative of the white savior. And that asserts the racist ideology that Black people and people of color are unable to govern societies. So yes, the DA-ANC coalition will be the most strategically based option or strategically smartest option for the ANC at the moment to not lose the support of the West like the UK and the US, since the DA is mostly funded by Western people, you know? The question is, do we John Steenhuisen as being the same man? One man's genocide is another man's. When just a few years ago, a group of lawyers from South Africa took Israel to the ICJ because of the genocide that's happening. I mean, how contradicting would that be to the world as a country? Yeah, and then lastly, I just want to say, do we really want an Oppenheimer-funded party so high up in power in our country? Like, I don't think that is a good idea. It is the smartest idea at the moment, but I just don't think.
You see, I like what you're saying, Trisha, because I believe, and bringing the apartheid and the racial thing into it, I think the challenge here is we're not just a country that's, we come from a lot. Just getting our country to a place where we have democracy has been a challenge in itself. And I think the point of view, the voter out there still has the opinion, looking at left and right, the ANC being on the left and the DA being on the right, that this is a majority white kind of system, and this is the narrative that they voted for the past 30 years or whatever, since the DA obviously was there and was actually developed. And now I've voted for them and I've shown my support and I've gathered my friends and family and I've, kind of got all these people on board to vote DA. And now what's happening? How is this? How does it make sense for a complete left-wing party and a complete right-wing party to now take hands, and we as a country, all the people of South Africa on both sides have to feel safe? Because there's so much that's talking about our past as a country that has an effect on this. And I think this is the one thing that maybe they're not looking at. I know that it's only 5 years again until, we've got this major election again, and time will tell. I think a lot of what we're saying, it is speculation. We don't know what will happen. How will this play out? No one can say for sure. But definitely for me, I'm thinking, how is this going to work? It's just, it doesn't make sense, even though, like you say, strategically speaking, this is the best coalition to form. It doesn't make sense to me. And it doesn't make sense to the voter that stood in those queues for 7-8 hours, a few days ago to go and vote DA, and they've not supported the ANC and vice versa. And now these two are taking hands and we're going to be this one happy family. How is this going to work?
That's what I'm saying when I say that a lot of people would have voted differently, because research has shown like the chances of the ANC-DA thing working is this is a fragile relationship, because we've seen it in Tshwane, we've seen it in Nelson Mandela Bay, where the coalitions between these two rivals have been cobbled together, and it's just not making sense. I feel like there was conversations that happened before the election. You can't help but feel they kept us in the dark about something somehow. Maybe it's the thing of keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Like, we'd rather be in the conversations than have the other parties be part of this coalition. We'd rather have that control or some sort of say, rather than partnering this side and being like against each other. So I don't know, maybe they're trying a different approach, but I did not see this coming one bit. I didn't see it coming.
We don't know where we're standing. In the last 30 years, things just went downhill. Obviously we have some tiny progress, but is this coalition going to reverse that progress?
That's
I mean,
the thing. That's the
for
thing.
the 5 years, the main focus, in my opinion, should be to alleviate poverty and to
Yeah.
stable economic growth. That should be the goal. And with our main opposition party being the DA, them being so right-handed and anti-poor, anti-ization, that is not going to get us goal, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now, this was a mouthful. I see there on Dirk's lap, we've got a special guest. I don't know if he's fighting for the rights of pets. Dirk, beautiful dog that you've got there. I want to thank you all so much for joining in on this session. It was an absolute mouthful. And I do hope that this discussion in some way, look, I think after some of these discussions usually leave you more in the dark, because now we've got people thinking after this, you know, and yeah, we don't know. Like I said, where is this headed? And I think the uncertainty is what's killing people out there. Is, you know, it's my future, it's my children's future. I always talk about this. Is being a mom myself of a 7-year-old boy, his future is important to me. You know, where does this leave him? And we don't have the answers. And I don't think anyone in Parliament or in the political arena has these answers. And this is a scary, scary place for South Africa to be. But we'll have to see. I think we will conduct more of these live panel interviews in the upcoming weeks, because I think people find it very interesting. And just hearing the opinions of people that's on the ground, you know, that's been working with some of the public, that's seen how some of these politics play out, you know, and just hearing from a different kind of source, and not just from mainstream media and eating everything up that they tell us also, you know, trying to paint a different picture maybe. So it's been absolutely great. Thank you so much for spending your evening with me. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that this panel discussion has been able to shed some light in a time where the people of South Africa feel very confused. I want to wish you a beautiful evening further and a blessed week. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.